There's a little song that we sing in our movement down in the South. I don't know if you've heard it, but it has become the theme song, We Shall Overcome. We shall overcome. Deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome. And though I join hands with students and others behind jail bars singing it, we shall overcome. Sometimes we've had tears in our eyes when we joined together to sing it, but we still decided to sing it, we shall overcome. Oh, before this victory is won, some of us will be thrown in jail some more, but we shall overcome. Don't worry about us. Before this victory is won, some of us will lose jobs, but we shall overcome. Before this victory is won, some of us will even have to face physical death. But if physical death is the price that some must pay to free their children from a permanent psychological death, then nothing shall be more redemptive. We shall overcome. Oh, before this victory is won, some of us will be called bad names and dismissed as rebel rousers and agitators, but we shall overcome. And I'll tell you why. We shall overcome because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. We shall overcome because Carlyle is right. No lie can live forever. We shall overcome because William Cullen Bryant is right. Truth crushed to earth will rise again. We shall overcome because James Russell Lowell was right. Truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne. Yet that scaffold sways the future. Behind the dim unknown standeth God within the shadows, keeping watch above his own. We shall overcome because the Bible is right. You shall reap what you sow. We shall overcome. Deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome. And with this faith, let us go out and adjourn the councils of despair and bring new light into the dark chambers of pessimism. We will be able to rise from the fatigue of despair to the buoyancy of hope. And this will be a great America. And we will be the participants in making it so. So as I leave you this evening, I say to you, walk together chilling. Don't you get weary. There's a great camp meeting in the promised land. We shall overcome.
My name is David Anthony Johnson, Sr. Anytime that I have the opportunity to remind the world of a great soldier that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was, it is always my pleasure. I started around the age of 5, and I was inspired to do so because of the love and honor and respect that I had for my great-grandmother who helped to raise me along with my mother and my aunt. My father was not in the home. All of those women played double duty. They were mother and father. So my great-grandmother, her father was a Tennessee slave. And so she grew up in the generation right after slavery. So she would instill into me the epic of love, the epic of standing up, knowing your rights and fighting for what's right and standing up for right, doing right because it's right.
If I can show somebody he's traveling wrong, then my living will not be in vain.
Because I loved her, she would say to me, David, do you love me? Yes, Mama, I love you. Well, if you love me, I want you to learn Dr. King's speeches. And she would buy many of his albums and play it when we were eating after church. And so I was afraid of his voice. I thought it sounded more like thundering and lightning. But she says, if you love me, you're going to learn these speeches, and I want you to one day remind the world of how God used this man and how he allowed himself to be used to be an example of what Jesus said to us, love your neighbor. So out of my love for my great-grandmother, I decided to learn these speeches.
Free at last, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
What I enjoy about the first speech, personally, I learned that speech when I was a young teenager. And the speech, the relevance of the speech it was around 1967 when the Black Power cry was in the land, in the Black community. And Stokely Carmichael, H. Rap Brown, and all of the new theme was Black Power. We're not going to take this anymore. And Dr. King didn't like that tide because he saw that that was a suicide, if you will, that the best way was the way that God blessed them 12 years earlier in the infancy of the movement, when Mrs. Rosa Parks made her protest by sitting down. She stood up by sitting down. And he wanted to remind them we can't get away from what was successful and what the Bible says. And if we're to have any kind of success, we must do what God says. And that epic of turning the other cheek, which the Black Power movement wasn't about that. But you could see the success in the way that Martin Luther King had led and started the movement, which is what we know today as the Civil Rights Movement. So Dr. King is waxing poetic in 1967 about the days, the fiery, turbulent days of 1955, shortly after Mrs. Parks sat down. And so that speech also, I did that speech for Mrs. Parks. I was going to speak for her in 1994. And right before the program started, I met her in the green room. And she said, baby, what speech are you gonna do? And I said, I'm gonna do, I have a dream speech and sing the Black National Anthem. She said, oh, I'm so tired of that speech. I hear it all the time. My pastor was so much more than that. Could you do something else? And on the cuff, she asked me to change the speech, and how am I gonna tell Mrs. Parks no? So I went to those in charge of the program and I told them that I will be making a change. And they were nervous, but I told them, it's all right, God's got it. And when I did that speech, which bears her name, I saw her, she was sitting up high on a podium, and she started to cry.
A lady by the name of Rosa Parks decided that she wasn't gonna take it any longer.
And after the program, we met for 3 hours, and she told me that that speech took her back to those days in Montgomery when she was arrested. So that speech has a lot of history within it because Dr. King was letting them know that I had to put my life out on the line for this movement, for the love of my fellow brothers. God told us to love him with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Well, he says, I love my neighbor, and I proved it. And that's what I love about the first speech, the old days.
One day, after finishing school, I was called to a little church down in Montgomery, Alabama. I'd been preaching, there were things going well in that church. It was a marvelous experience. But one day, a year later, a lady by the name of Rosa Parks decided that she wasn't gonna take it any longer. She stayed in the bus seat. You may not remember it now because it was several years ago, but it was the beginning of a movement where 50,000 black men and women refused absolutely to ride the city buses. We walked together for 381 days. As we got to learn in the law, Negroes got to learn to stick together. We stuck together. We sent out the call, and no Negro rode the buses. It was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen in my life. Yes, the people of Montgomery asked me to serve as the spokesman. As the president of the new organization, the Montgomery Improvement Association, that came into being to lead the boycott, oh, I couldn't say no. Then we started our struggle together. Things were going well for the first few days, but then, about 10 or 15 days later, after the white people in Montgomery knew that we meant business, oh, they started doing some nasty things, making nasty telephone calls till it got to the point that more than 40 telephone calls would come in, threatening my life, the life of my family, the life of my children. I took it for a while in a strong manner, but I never will forget one night, very late. It was around midnight. And you can have some strange experiences at midnight. I had been out meeting with the steering committee all that night. Came home. Wife was in the bed, and I crawled in the bed to get some rest to try to keep things going, when immediately the telephone started ringing, and I picked it up. On the other end was an ugly voice. That voice said to me in substance, "Nigger, we are tired of you and your mess now. If you ain't out of this town in 3 days, we gonna blow your brains out and blow up your house." And I'd heard these things before, but for some reason that night it got to me. I tried to roll over and get some sleep, but I couldn't sleep. I was frustrated, bewildered. Then I got out of the bed and went down to the kitchen to warm me a cup of coffee, thinking that coffee would give me a little relief. Oh yes, I started thinking about many things. I pulled back on the theology and philosophy that I had just studied in the universities, trying to give philosophical and theological reasons for the existence and the realities of sin and evil, but the answer didn't quite come there. Thought about a beautiful little daughter who had just been born about a month earlier. We have 4 children now, but we only had one then. She was the darling of my life. I come in night after night and see that little gentle smile. I sat at that table thinking about that little girl and thinking about the fact that she could be taken away from me any minute. Oh yes, I thought about a dedicated, devoted, and loyal wife who was over there asleep. She could be taken from me. I could be taken from her. So I got to the point that I couldn't take it any longer. I was weak. Something said to me, "You can't call on Daddy now. He's up in Atlanta, 175 miles away. No, you can't even call on Mama now." Oh, but you gotta call on that something and that person that your daddy used to tell you about. Oh, that power that can make a way out of no way. Yes, I discovered then that religion had to become real to me, and I had to know God for myself. Oh, yes, I bowed down over that cup of coffee. I'll never will forget it. Oh, yes, I prayed a prayer. And I prayed our Lord loud that night. I said, I'm down here trying to do what's right. Oh, I think I'm right. I think the cause that we represent is right. But Lord, I must confess that I'm weak now, I'm faltering, I'm losing my courage. Seemed that at that moment I could hear an inner voice saying to me, Martin Luther, stand up for righteousness. Stand up for justice. Stand up for truth. And Lord, I will be with you even unto the ends of the world. I tell you, I've seen the lightning flash. I've heard the thunder roar. I felt sin breakers dashing, trying to conquer my soul. But I heard the voice of Jesus saying still to fight on. He promised never to leave me, never to leave me alone. No, never alone. No, never alone. He promised never to leave me, never to leave me alone. Sometimes I feel discouraged. I don't mind telling you this morning that sometimes I feel discouraged. Felt discouraged in Chicago as I moved through Mississippi and Georgia and Alabama. I feel discouraged. Living every day under the threat of death, I feel discouraged sometimes. Living every day under extensive criticism, even from Negroes, I feel discouraged sometimes. Oh, yes, sometimes I feel discouraged and feel my works in vain. But then the Holy Spirit revives my soul again. There's a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There's a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. God bless you.
Many people say that they love God, but they hate their neighbor. They hate their brothers and sisters of another race, of another lifestyle, of another gender, of another religion. How can we say we love a God we haven't seen when we hate our brothers who we see each and every day? We flunk the test of love each and every day, but yet we feel we're going to pass the test of loving God. So this speech tells us how Martin Luther King wasn't just talking that talk, but he was walking that talk. He put his life on the line for his brothers and sisters. He had many critics, but those critics were comfortably criticizing him in their offices, in their cities, out of harm's way, criticizing this man who was on the front lines, willing to die, knowing when President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in 1963, Dr. King was 34. And as they were watching everything that transpired on the television, he looked at his wife and said, I don't think I'll live to see my 40th birthday. And he died at 39. But he did what he did for all mankind, red or yellow, black and white. He knew all was precious in God's sight. So he died for all men. I want to have a legacy like that, that I didn't just imitate Dr. King. I didn't just go out and sing and preach the gospel, but like Dr. King, I wanted to live it, to walk it. So I wouldn't just be an imitator. I would be a person that really took Dr. King's philosophy, which was the philosophy of Jesus Christ, to go out and love God with all my heart and to love my neighbor as myself. And that's what I loved about this speech of Dr. King.
This speech is entitled The Drum Major Instinct. It was done at the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia, Dr. Martin Luther King's home church. And it was done on February 4th, 1968, 2 months to the day of his assassination. This speech best typifies the character of Martin Luther King and the teachings of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. It is a lesson on love and humility one-on-one. Listen to this speech and sense the power of love and humility. This morning, I would like to use as a subject from which to preach, entitled The Drum Major Instinct. The drum major instinct. And our text for the morning is taken from a very familiar passage found in the 10th chapter of the Gospel as recorded by St. Mark. Beginning with the 35th verse of that chapter, we read these words. And James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came unto him, saying, Master, we would that thou shouldest do for us whatsoever we shall desire. And he said unto them, What would ye that I should do for you? And they said unto him, Grant unto us that we may sit, one on thy right hand, and the other on thy left hand in thy glory. And he said unto them, Ye know not what ye ask. Can you drink of the cup that I drink of, and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with? And they said unto him, We can. And he said unto them, Ye shall indeed drink of the cup that I drink of, and with the baptism that I am baptized withal shall ye be baptized. But to sit on my right hand and on my left hand is not mine to give, but it shall be given to them for whom it is prepared. Then Jesus goes on toward the end of that passage to say, But so shall it not be among you, but whosoever will be the greatest among you shall be your servant. And whomsoever of you will be the chiefest shall be servant of all. Now the setting is clear. James and John are making a specific request of the Master. You see, they had dreamed, as most of the Hebrews dreamed, of a coming king of Israel who would set Jerusalem free and establish his his kingdom on Mount Zion and in righteousness rule the world. And they thought of Jesus as this kind of king. And they were thinking of that day when Jesus would reign supreme as this new king of Israel. And so they were saying, now when you establish a kingdom, let one of us sit on the right hand and the other on the left hand of your throne. Now, very quickly, we would automatically condemn James and John. We would say they were selfish. Why would they make such a selfish request? Oh, but before we condemn them too quickly, let us look calmly and honestly at ourselves, and we will discover that we have some of those same James and John qualities. There is deep down within all of us an instinct. It's a kind of drum major instinct, a desire to be out front, a desire to lead the parade, a desire to be first. This is something that runs the whole gamut of life. And so before we condemn them, let us see that we all have the drum major instinct. We all want to be important, to surpass others, to achieve distinction, to lead the parade. You know, Alfred Adler, the great psychoanalyst, contends that this is the dominant impulse. Sigmund Freud used to contend that sex was the dominant impulse until Adler came with a new argument saying that this desire for attention, this quest for recognition, this desire for distinction is the basic impulse, the basic drive of human life, this real drum major instinct. And you know, we begin early to ask life to put us first. Our first cry as a baby was a bid for attention. And all through childhood, the drum major impulse or instinct is a major obsession. Children ask life to grant them first place. They are a little bungle of ego. They have innately the drum major impulse or the drum major instinct. Now in adult life, we still have it, and you know, we really never get by it. You know, we like to do something good, and you know, we like to be praised for it. Now, if you don't believe that, you just go on living life and you will discover very soon that you like to be praised. Everybody likes it, as a matter of fact, because of somehow this warm glow we feel when we are praised or when our name is in print. It is something of the vitamin A to our ego. Nobody is unhappy when they are praised, even if they know they don't deserve it, and even if they don't believe it. The only unhappy people about praise is when that praise is going too much towards somebody else. But everybody likes to be praised because of this real drum major instinct. But let me rush on to my conclusion, because I want you to see what Jesus was really saying. What was the answer that Jesus gave these men? It's very interesting. One would have thought that Jesus would have condemned them. One would have thought that Jesus would have said, "You are out of your place. You were selfish. Why would you raise such a question?" But you see, that isn't what Jesus did. He did something altogether different. He said in substance, "Oh, I see. You want to be first. You want to be great. You want to be important. You want to be significant. Where you ought to be. If you want to be my disciples, you must be." But he reordered priorities. He said, "Yes, this is a good instinct. It's a good instinct if you use it right. It's a good instinct if you don't distort it or pervert it, but don't give it up. Keep feeling the need for being first. Keep feeling the need for being important. But I want you to be first in love. I want you to be first in moral excellence. I want you to be first in generosity. That is what I want you to do." And he transformed the situation by giving a new definition of greatness. And you know how he said it. He said, "Now, brethren, I can't give you greatness. And really, I can't make you first." This is what Jesus said to James and John. "You must earn it. True greatness comes not by favoritism, but by fitness. The right hand and the left are not mine to give. They belong to those who are prepared." So Jesus gives us a new norm of greatness. If you want to be great, wonderful. If you want to be important, wonderful. If you want to be recognized, wonderful. But I want you to be great in love. I want you to be great in moral excellence. I want you to be great in generosity. That is what I want you to do. God bless you.
This man allowed himself to be used by God, and he ignored the stings of death in order to accomplish what he was put on earth to do, was to spread love. His love was not just merely a noun, but a verb. It comes from the mindset that love isn't love until you've given it away. And when one watches and listens to his speeches, and I hope to have done the best job that I could, and hopefully Dr. King would have been proud of me, is to say to everyone, this man was the epitome, not of perfection, but the epitome of love. And that's what I try to do and how I try to live my life. This speech is born out of the philosophy of Matthew, the 25th chapter, verses 14 through 30, about the talents. And Dr. King was speaking to his congregation, to the young people there, letting them know that the doors of freedom and opportunity that had never been open to the Black or African American, or as we were called in those days, Negroes, and that the doors of freedom were about to come open. And the way that you enter through the doors of freedom is through education. And he was letting them know, use your talents that God has given you. Whatever it is, give it back to him by using it for his glory. And if you use it for his glory, God will come and give you more. So this speech, although a short speech, it packs a punch, because Dr. King was saying that whatever life gives you, be your best. And if you are your best in small things, God will increase your barns in many things.
Greatest challenge that we face is to be ready to enter these doors when they open. Ralph Waldo Emerson said in a lecture back in 1871, if a man can write a better book, preach a better sermon, or make a better mousetrap than his neighbor, even as he builds his house in the woods, the world will make a beaten path to his door. And this will become increasingly true. That means we're gonna have to work hard. We're gonna have to learn to burn the midnight oil sometime, take advantages of new opportunities. We must not seek merely to do a good Negro job if you're setting out to be merely a good Negro doctor, or a good Negro lawyer, or a good Negro preacher, or a good Negro teacher, or a good Negro barber, or a good Negro skilled laborer, or a good Negro beautician. Then you have already flunked your matriculation exam for entrance into the University of Integration. We must get ready. We must set out to do our life's work so well that nobody can do it better. We must set out to do a good job and to do that job so well that the living, the dead, or the unborn couldn't do it better. As I've said so often, if it falls your lot to be a street sweeper, go out and sweep streets like Michelangelo carved marble. Sweep streets like Raphael painted pictures. Sweep streets like Beethoven composed music and like Shakespeare wrote poetry. Sweep streets so well that all the host of heaven and earth will have to pause and say, here lived the world's best street sweeper who swept his job well. This is it. Oh, if you can't be a pine on the top of the hill, be a shrub in the valley, but be the best little shrub on the side of the rim. Can't be a tree, be a bush. Can't be a highway, just be a trail. If you can't be the sun, be a star. For it isn't by size that you win or you fail. Be the best at whatever you are.
What was amazing about Dr. King's eulogy speech, it was the second to the last major speech that Dr. King did 2 months before his assassination. Dr. King wanted to let them know that I may be at the end of my rope here, but let me reflect back on what I tried to do. And he, like the Apostle Paul, he wanted to say, I fought a good fight. And this was the fight I fought, lest you forget. My fight was about love and courage, and the ability to stand up against evil, regardless of what the fallout might be. It is never a wrong time to do the right thing. It is always right to do right, and it is never wrong to do right. And this was his legacy, to say, stand up no matter what. And they played that at the Ebenezer Baptist Church at his funeral. They just played the recording. So he did preach his own eulogy.
I guess we all think realistically about that day when we will be victimized at what is life's final common denominator. And that's something we call death. And every now and then I think about my own death, my own funeral. But I don't think of it in a morbid sense, but every now and then I ask myself, what is it that I would want said? And I leave the word with you this morning. If any of you around when I have to meet my day, I don't want a long funeral. And if you get somebody to deliver the eulogy, tell them not to talk too long. Every now and then I'd ask myself what I'd want them to say. Tell them not to mention that I have a Nobel Peace Prize. That isn't important. Tell them not to mention that I have 300 or 400 other awards. Tell them not to mention where I went to school. But I'd like somebody to mention that day Martin Luther King Jr. tried to love somebody. Like for somebody to say on that day that I tried to be right on the war question. Like for somebody to say that day that I did try to feed the hungry. Like for somebody to say on that day that I did try to visit those who were in prison. Like for somebody to say that day that I did try in my life to clothe those who were naked. Like for somebody to say on that day that I tried to love and serve humanity. Yes, if you want to say that I was a drum major, say that I was a drum major for justice. Say that I was a drum major for peace, that I was a drum major for righteousness. And all of the other shallow things would not matter. I won't have any money to leave behind. I won't have none of the fine and luxurious things of life to leave behind. I just want to leave a committed life behind. And that's all I want to say. If I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can cheer somebody with a word or song, if I could show somebody he's traveling wrong, then my living will not be in vain. Or if I could do my duty as a Christianaut, bring salvation to a world once wrought, if I could spread the message as the Master taught, then my living will not be in vain. Yes, Jesus, I want to be on your right or your best side. Not for any selfish reason. I want to be on your right or your best side, not in terms of some political kingdom or ambition, but I just want to be there in love and in justice and in commitment to others, that we can make of this old world a new world.
We reflect back on I've Been to the Mountaintop. Some say that it's entitled I See the Promised Land. Dr. King is acting like a modern day Moses. And he's reflecting back on his relationship with his best friend Ralph Abernathy and how the movement got started. And so he's kind of putting it all together like a bow, because he knew death was at his door. He had received a lot of death threats. And so this speech, I've Been to the Mountaintop, it takes us to Moses and how Moses knew that his time was up because the Most High told him. He knew that he would not make it over. And Dr. King was using the example that Moses set forth and said, you know what, I don't believe that I'm going to make it over and see the fruits of my labor, but it's okay. I know I've done my part. Like Paul says, I fought a good fight. This was Dr. King's version of Paul's I fought a good fight. Dr. King was saying, I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land because he had a faith that I'm going to leave this legacy behind, hoping that someone else picks up the baton and creates their own legacy. But the biggest tools of that legacy that he wanted to leave behind was a legacy of courage and the legacy of love.
Thank you very kindly, my friend. As I listen to Ralph Abernathy and his eloquent and generous introduction, and then thought about myself, I wondered who he was talking about. It is always good to have your closest friend and associate to say something good about you. Ralph is indeed the best friend that I have in the world. And I'm delighted to see each of you here tonight in spite of a storm warning. You reveal that you are determined to go on anyhow. Something is happening in Memphis. Something is happening in our world. And as you know, if the Almighty came to me and said, Martin Luther King, which age would you like to live in? And I would take my mental flight to Egypt, through the Red Sea on toward the wilderness, through the promised land. But in spite of its magnificence, I wouldn't stop there. Then I would take my mind to Mount Olympus. There I would see Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, Euripides, and Aristophanes assembled around the Parthenon as they discussed the great and eternal issues of realities, but I wouldn't stop there. I would even come up to the great heyday of the Roman Empire and see various developments around through various emperors and leaders. But I wouldn't stop there. I would even come up to the day of the Renaissance and get a quick picture of all that the Renaissance did for the cultural and aesthetic life of man, but I wouldn't stop there. I would even go by the way of the man in whom I'm named had his habitat. And I would watch Martin Luther as he tacked his 95 theses at the door of the church of Wittenberg, but I wouldn't stop there. I would even come up to 1863. Watch a vacillating president by the name of Abraham Lincoln finally come to the conclusion that he had to sign the Emancipation Proclamation, but I wouldn't stop there. I would even come up to the early 30s. Watch a president grappling with the problems of the bankruptcy of his nation come with an eloquent cry that we have nothing to fear but fear itself, but I wouldn't stop there. strangely enough, I would turn to the Almighty. And I would say, now, if you would allow me to live just a few years in the second half of the 20th century, I will be happy. Now, that's a strange statement to make because the world is all messed up. The nation is sick. Confusion all around. That's a strange statement. But somehow I realize that only when it is dark enough can you see the stars. And I see God working in this period, the 20th century, that men in some strange way are responding. Something is happening in our world. The masses of people are rising up, and wherever they are assembled today, whether they are in Nairobi, Kenya, Accra, Ghana, New York City, Atlanta, Georgia, Jackson, Mississippi, or Memphis, Tennessee, the cry is always the same. We want to be free. Now I'm just happy that God has allowed me to live in this period, to see what is unfolding. And I'm happy that God has allowed me to be in Memphis. You know, several years ago, I was in New York City, autographing the first book that I had just written. While autographing books, a black woman came up. She asked, was I Martin Luther King? And I was looking down writing, and I said, yeah. Next thing, I felt something beating on my chest. I had been stabbed by this demented woman. The blade had gone through, and the x-rays revealed that the tip of the blade was on the edge of my aorta, the main artery. Once that's punctured, you drown in your own blood, that's the end of you. It came out in the New York Times that if I had merely sneezed, I would have died. But after the operation, a few days later, they allowed me to roam around the hospital in the wheelchair. And I'd received a visit and a letter from the governor of New York, but I've forgotten what that letter said. I'd received letters and telegrams from the president and the vice president. Kind letters from people all over the world came in, but I've forgotten what those telegrams said. Oh, but there was one letter I will never forget. It's from a little girl. It read simply, Dear Dr. King, I am a 9th grade student at the White Plains High School. I would like to mention that I am a white girl, and I read of your suffering and of your misfortune. And I read that if you had sneezed, you would have died. Well, I'm writing you to let you know that I am so happy that you didn't sneeze. Because if I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1960. Students started sitting in at lunch counters. And I knew that as they were sitting in, they were really standing up for the best in the American dream and taking the nation back to those great wells of democracy, which were dug deep by the founding fathers of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1961, when we decided to take a ride for freedom and ended segregation in interstate travel. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1962, when Negroes in Albany, Georgia decided to straighten their backs up. And whenever men and women straighten their backs up, they are going somewhere, because a man can't ride your back unless it is bent. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1963. Black people of Birmingham, Alabama aroused the conscience of this nation, brought into being the Civil Rights Bill. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around later that year in August to try to tell America about a dream that I had had. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been in Selma, Alabama to see that great movement there. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been in Memphis to see a community rally around those brothers and sisters who were suffering. Oh, I'm so happy that I didn't sneeze. And they were telling me, although it really doesn't matter what happens now. Left Atlanta this morning, there were 6 of us on the plane. The pilot came over the public address system. He said, "We are sorry for the delay, but we have Dr. Martin Luther King on the plane." The plane had to be protected and guarded all night. Then we got into Memphis, and all that I could hear were the threats that were out from some of our sick brethren. I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over. And I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Me being a vocalist, I had to listen to his speeches and make his words lyrics. And I add those lyrics to a melody in my mind. Rhythms. And by me, in essence, translating his words into music, it was easier for me to memorize the words. The I Have a Dream speech, one of the greatest, if not the greatest speech of the 20th century. The Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., August 28, 1963, 100 years from the time that Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves with the Emancipation Proclamation. And so Dr. King and many others had marched to the nation's capital to demand their freedom, to say, hey, this is what you put on paper, now you must actually do what you put on paper. So a few speakers came up to speak, powerful speakers. But then when Dr. King came up to speak, he was reminded even by Mahalia Jackson as he was speaking. She said, talk about the dream, because in other speeches before where she was one of his singers, he would talk about his dream that he had. So the I Have a Dream speech was not really supposed to go the way it went. It was kind of impromptu, the dream part, because Mahalia Jackson is telling him, mention the dream, and that's when Dr. King goes into that iconic part of the speech that we all remember. 250,000 people, red, yellow, black, brown, and white, ascended our nation's capital, and Dr. King's speech was the exclamation point to the whole program that weekend.
Five score years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to the millions of Negro slaves that had been seared in the withering flames of injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of the vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society, and he finds himself in exile in his own land. So we've come here today to dramatize a very shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the great architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, will be guaranteed the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But it is obvious today that America has defaulted on its promissory note insofar as its citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. No, we refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we've come to this nation to cash a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark, desolate valleys of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all God's children. Oh, I say to you today, my friends, Even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners one day be able to sit down together at the table of justice. I have a dream that one day the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of oppression, sweltering with the heat of injustice, one day be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that one day my 4 little children one day be able to live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that down in Alabama, with its vicious racist, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. Right there in Alabama, little black boys and little black girls will one day be able to join hands with little white boys and little white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that every valley will be exalted. Every hill and mountain will be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation to a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when we can sing with new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside let freedom ring. And if America's to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring. From the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire, let freedom ring. From the mighty mountains of New York, let freedom ring. From the highland Alleghenies of Pennsylvania, let freedom ring. From the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado, let freedom ring. From the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. And when this happens, when we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
What's there to hold in the light of this moon? My mind keeps searching, but my heart decides. Thoughts can be cruel, they're not mine to own. The space unravels when you let go. What's yours in mine that
Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
I will blow it home your way. Moon mother, open your arms. Moon mother, this madness just begun. Moon mother, reach for my heart so I can feel your essence in me. What's there to hold in the light of this moon? My mind keeps searching, but my heart decides. Thoughts can be cruel, they're not mine to hold. The space unravels